Welcome back to Forbidden Knowledge News. I'm your host, Chris Matthew. Tonight I want to welcome back to the show Etienne de la Boetie. He's author of the book Understanding Our Slavery and founder of the Art of Liberty Foundation, which exposes the illegitimacy and criminality of government and the hidden curriculum of organized crimes, mandatory government schools, scouting programs, and military training. Etienne, how you doing tonight?
Fantastic, Chris. It's good to be with you again.
Yeah, thanks for joining us again. Last time you did a fascinating presentation. I know you have another one for us tonight. Before we get into that, I'd like to know, what opened your eyes to our reality? I know for me, I've always had a sense that something wasn't right. By the time I realized, everything that was going on behind the scenes, I realized that I had basically been a slave from birth. They start indoctrinating you through the education system. And, most people don't even realize it. They can't help it. They just become more and more into this slave system as their lives go. And before they know it, they don't know where they're at and they don't know where their life went. And they're stuck in some job that they can't get out of. So what was it for you? What opened your eyes to how things really work?
I think it was a couple of different things. When the federal government, are you still getting my audio?
Yeah.
Okay. When the federal government murdered 80 men, women, and children at Waco, and then the media covered it up, and the testimony of the survivors, the testimony of the local sheriff, the testimony of kind of whistleblower ATF agents, the discovery of incendiary rounds in the debris, the discovery of the FLIR video showing FBI hostage rescue and Delta Force, mowing down people running out of a burning church. That was definitely an eye-opener. But really, the main thing that made me realize kind of the degree of deception that the media and the government were engaged in was in the kind of the late 90s. I was working at one of the big four think tanks in Washington, D.C., and I had access to a $3,000 a month LexisNexis terminal. And for those that don't, back before the internet, before everybody had kind of, all of the newspapers and everything was online, you really had to use a service called LexisNexis that was creating transcriptions of every news article. They were, they were collating articles from around the country, local, state, regional newspapers, kind of everything, plus transcripts. And after the Murrah building bombing, where it was alleged that, I don't know if everyone remembers the story, but a disgruntled Army vet named Tim McVeigh, who was a militia member. And so after Waco, the militia movement was growing rapidly in the United States. And so people were saying to the federal government, hey, oh my God, look what they did. They just burned down a church and killed 80 men, women, and children. Hey, maybe we better arm up to protect ourselves. And so kind of after the militia movement started getting going, this quote unquote militia member by the name of Tim McVeigh supposedly set off a truck bomb full of ammonia nitrate fuel oil explosive in front of the Murrah building in Oklahoma City, right outside of a daycare center, killing dozens and dozens of children and people within the building. And because I had the LexisNexis terminal, I could get, not only could I get the story that the national news media was telling, but I was getting the story that the local newspapers, the local television station, Channel 4, alternative, publications were reporting on what had happened. And I quickly realized that, hey, the original, the what the national news is reporting doesn't jive at all with what the local and the alternative news is reporting. And so I just began, researching that with all the tools that I had available, maybe working at, one of the leading think tanks on the planet. And so I very quickly came to realize that the story that the government, the ATF, the FBI were telling was a complete, absolute fabrication, and that the number one suspects were the government themselves. And then shortly thereafter, a Brigadier General, Benton K. Parton, who ran the U.S. Air Force's armament testing laboratory, came to the exact same conclusion. He put together a report detailing the scientific impossibility of the government story. He hand-delivered it to 60-plus members of Congress, and other alternative publications began picking up the story. The mainstream media completely changed the story in midstream on day one, and this is the first thing I ever really watched go down the memory hole. But on day one after the Oklahoma City bombing, on the day of the Oklahoma City bombing, every single station, national, regional, local, were reporting on multiple bombs found within the building. And these multiple bombs were reported by the governor. Governor had a press conference. Other city officials had press conferences. This was, widely reported by the national news, the networks, the whole, everybody was talking about multiple bombs in the building, and showing video of the bomb squad going up to the building and removing the bombs. They evacuated the building, leaving people trapped in the rubble, saying, "Hey, we've got to get out of the building while they defuse these bombs. We'll be back for you." They're like, "No." People are like, "No, no." And so the next day, boom, just gone. No explanation, nothing, and the mainstream media will just never talk about it again. And that was the first time that I realized kind of the extent of the media censorship and the capability to control perception and reality by controlling the narrative of a major event, where they're able to override the alternative news and the local news and the people on the ground with something that is absolutely non-reflective of the reality of the situation. And that was what really woke me up to that there's a controlled perception program going on here, and it is being run at a kind of very, very high level, where you've got a handful of companies buying up and consolidating the media industry, and then all working together as a cartel to put out not just propaganda, but complete, absolute, bold-faced lies, including assisting the federal government, intelligence agencies, domestic police agencies, especially the FBI, in covering up the most heinous of murders, crimes, and terrorist incidents.
Yeah, and once you know what is happening, once you know how the media manipulates, they use divide and conquer tactics, it becomes so obvious and so disgusting. But it is encouraging to me that I do see a bit of the population starting to wake up to this. That is one thing in this whole situation that makes me have a little bit of hope, is that I do see people waking up. But let's get into this. I know you have a little presentation for us, so go ahead. What do you have for us?
Yeah, so just to kind of give your readers a little bit of more of a background. So the book, for those that might have missed my first appearance on the show, my book is called "Understanding Our Slavery: How Organized Crime Runs the Government and the Media." And I write the book from a voluntarist standpoint, and my thesis is that government is illegitimate, because if I don't have the right to rule you, make up laws for you personally, I myself don't have the right to make up laws for Chris or take Chris's money, then I can't delegate a right that I do not have myself to a representative or to a government. And so if the right of the government to do all of the things that it does doesn't come from we the people, because it's impossible to come from we the people, because we the people don't have the right to steal people's money or make up rules for them, then where did the government get the right to do these things? And the answer is they don't have the right to do these things. It's been a scam from the beginning. Nobody signed any social contract. What happened was intergenerational organized crime, working with the media of the day, just got together in a room. Three dozen slave owners wrote down on a piece of paper that they alone get to make up rules for everyone and take the wealth of others. And then they had their newspapers proclaim it valid, and they just took over the place. And within very, very shortly, they began taxing the population and taking that money and handing it right to Wall Street speculators. They began paying off the quote-unquote war debts of some of the states that hadn't paid them. Thomas Jefferson openly questioned the validity of these debts and the amounts that the new federal government was paying to speculators and to businesses. And so, from my research, in the book, it has been this system where, we're going to take the population and we're going to kind of run this playbook on them of, how do you create tax slavery? And we're going to give you a flag, and we're going to give you a social contract that nobody signed, and we're going to force you into a mandatory government school where we teach you it's okay that we rule you. And then we're going to have the media reinforce it with hundreds of television shows and movies where the government's always the hero, whether it's an FBI agent or a CIA agent or the president of the United States flying fighter jets to protect the planet from aliens. And so what I'm trying to do is expose that by explaining how the system works in a kind of easy to read. I don't know, it's a picture book, but I use a lot of visualizations, and I use a lot of media ownership charts, and I use a lot of historical photographs so that the reader can very, very quickly come to an understanding, a deeper understanding of how the system works, because they can see what was previously invisible made visible through visualization. And so if I tell you that there's a small handful of companies running hundreds of subsidiaries, you may or not believe me, but if I show you a media ownership chart, you will. And so, but tonight, what I'm going to do is I'd like to share kind of with your audience a speech that I gave at the Anarchadelphia conference about a week and a half ago in Philadelphia. And the Anarchadelphia brought together, it was the first year conference, and about 150 plus participants in the growing kind of voluntarist movement. And so in the speech, I'll go ahead and start kind of sharing my screen with you.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I told the story, and I'm what that I call the biggest secret of the Secret Service. The government and the media are run by organized crime. Or I might call this the Secret Service's biggest secret: when pissed off veterans shook the gates of the White House and told the government no. And so I think I mentioned that I used to live outside, well, maybe I didn't, but I used to live outside of Washington, D.C. In Northern Virginia, and being so close to the city gave me the opportunity to go and participate in any time a protest would come to Washington, D.C. And so one of the protests that probably the most exciting and most underreported protest of all time was in October of 2013, when pissed off veterans came to Washington, D.C. in a march called the Veterans March on the Monuments. And to kind of set the stage for the audience of what was going on in October of 2017, the federal government was pretending that it had bumped up against the debt ceiling. And the debt ceiling is one of those kind of fictitious things, like the Social Security lockbox or the Bill of Rights that the government professes exists, but routinely ignores, because laws apply to us, but they never really apply to them. And so the debt ceiling, and so in October of 2013, as they were coming up on the debt ceiling, the Republicans were pretending to be fiscally conservative and going to hold the Democrats, feet to the fire. And the Obama administration, they were the Democrats. They were pretending that the government was just about to run out of money. And then at the same time, the Obama administration had been kind of exposed. They were the second year into the first year into their second term, and they'd been absolutely positively exposed as criminals and liars. Obama had promised to end the wars. He didn't end the wars. Obama had been caught, the Obama Clinton administration had been caught in a scandal called Solyndra, where they'd lost $500 million. It kind of vanished in loan guarantees to a quote unquote green energy company tied to the Obama administration. They had forced a unpopular health plan on the American people that was fraught with waste, fraud, and abuse. They had wasted over $500 million on a website that didn't work, with a company, conveniently run by one of Michelle Obama's classmates from Princeton. There were they had just given trillions of dollars to private banks and companies through the TARP and the TALF and the quote unquote bailouts. And so during this time, they were pretending that the government didn't have any money and that you got to give us more money so that we can steal it out the back door. And nobody was paying any attention because they had blown through the debt ceiling dozens and dozens of times since 1917. And because the American people weren't paying attention, the Obama administration decided that they were going to make it hurt for the common person. And so what they did is they began kind of closing down they began closing down the monuments. They did some things that were ridiculous, like close down the Panda Cam at the National Zoo, as if the administration didn't have the money to keep the Panda Cam running at the zoo. They closed down museums to inconvenience people that were in DC for a tour. They closed down national parks and national parks, even though those are essentially profit-making businesses. That there was no reason why they needed to close. They're producing revenue that would fund their operations if the government wasn't run like anything else. But the main thing that they did is they actually spent money that they claimed they didn't have to shut down the veterans memorials in Washington, D.C. And so anybody that's been to Washington, D.C. knows that the World War II memorial and the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, these are all kind of open air memorials. The people there kind of police themselves. They're all veterans and everything like that. And it had never been closed down before. But because they wanted to make it work, to make the average person kind of inconvenienced and hurt, so you'd whine to your congressman for action, that the government do something and turn the government back on. And, oh my God, turn the government back on, we're going to die. They wanted to make it hurt, so they spent money they didn't have to erect barricades that came to be known as barricades, steel barricades around the memorials to lock out the elderly and regular veterans that come to Washington, D.C. as tourists. And so they locked them out of their own memorials. Well, that ticked the veterans off very quickly. A march was organized. It was set on a Saturday in October. It was called the March to the Memorials. They also had something called the Truckers Ride for the Constitution that coincided on the same weekend. And the veterans were coming to Washington, D.C., and they were pissed. They'd already figured out Obama was a socialist and a criminal and a liar and everything else, and now they pissed him off, so they're coming to D.C. So this is my 60-foot sign, and I like to take it and cause trouble whenever I can. And it is always the biggest sign at any protest that I go to. And it is the most censored sign on the planet, because no matter how many times reporters come up to me and interview me and ask me about the sign, no matter how many times the sign gets photographed by people, thousands and thousands of people as an example, at the Women's March on Washington, we had this in front of the dais of the Capitol building, in front of the reflecting pool, so that tens of thousands of people streaming past us out of the Union Metro were at any one time 7 to 10 people were like stepped out of the line to take pictures of the sign. Never shows up on social media, even though I've had a half a dozen reporters interview me and ask me about the sign, take pictures of the sign. It never shows up on social media.
That's a great sign, by the way.
Thank you. So, and it's what I try to do is, how do you encapsulate in the shortest number of words the core of the problem, the executive summary of the executive summary, and then how do you make it as big as possible? And so I took the sign, headed down to Washington, D.C. with my two sons, who were at the time 9 and 11 years old, and we took this sign and we hung it on the fence around the Washington Monument, facing the veterans protest at the World War II Memorial, so that everybody at the protest, including the media there, could get a picture of the sign. And hold on a second, let me find a different version of this. So I'm missing some of my slides, but I'll just tell you what happened anyway. And so, so I actually had a picture that was taken of the Washington Monument where they literally cropped out the sign. So whichever press organization was taking a picture of to have it in the Washington Monument, where they had cropped out the bottom of the Washington Monument, and all you could see are patriotic flags on people's hats. And so, even though no matter where you put the sign, the media will find a way to crop it out of any scene, even though it's the most dramatic thing at the protest. So we went down there and we put it up on the fence. We took it down, and most people don't really remember, but what was shown to the world that happened at this protest were two different images. The right, the conservatives, Fox News crowd, was shown Sarah Palin and some other politicians, Ted Cruz, with their hands over their hearts, saluting the flag, patriotism, to make the veterans protest and try and make it appear to be a Republican thing. And that's the weaponized media pumped that out to everybody on the right. At the same time, the left-leaning media, and all they've done is they've just divided up the country into these two, the two largest demographic blocks, so they can play them against each other. But to the left-leaning media, the Washington Post and Salon and the New York Times and others, they had this agent provocateur dressed like a hillbilly, holding a Confederate flag in one hand and a Marine Corps flag in the other, and they tried to paint the veterans as racist hillbillies that didn't. That's why they're so ignorant that they're holding up Confederate flags outside the home of a black man. And that's how they tried to paint the veterans, with these two different images. But I happen to know that the redneck hillbilly was an agent provocateur, because after the rally at the World War II Veterans Memorial was over, two of his accomplices that were with him, who I observed with him talking together, they were obviously kind of together. As soon as that was over, the crowd is going to march to the White House. And as soon as the crowd begins moving to the White House, this guy's two Confederates go, we're going to the White House. Come on, we're going to the White House. And they begin trying to pull the crowd in a complete wrong direction, which is exactly what controlled opposition does, is they lead you into a dead end. And so I sat there and watched his two Confederates try to lead everybody in the wrong direction, until somebody who appeared to be an ex-officer, one of the veterans there, stepped in between him and the crowd, goes, "No, these guys, ignore them. It's this way." And just the entire crowd begins moving to the White House. Now, let me give you some more color and tell you, this is where it starts getting really, really cool. The veterans tear down the barricades, these heavy steel barricades. They put them over their heads, and they begin carrying them conga style line. There used to be a video on the internet, it's disappeared off of YouTube, that actually showed maybe a quarter of a mile of veterans carrying these things to the White House, and they begin throwing them on the steps of the White House and throwing them into a pile as loudly and as defiantly as they can. And the Secret Service is wigging out completely. I saw one group of veterans that had surrounded the uniformed Secret Service, and some of the women were crying as the veterans told them in no short order what they thought of the traitorous, criminal Obama administration. How can you work for Obama? He's a traitor. He's socialist. He's like literally just giving it to them up and down and left and right. Disappeared largely out off of YouTube. There is one video left that shows the veterans with a group of Secret Service agents up against the crowd, where they're literally grabbing the police batons and pushing the Secret Service back into this compact ball up against the wall. At the same time they're doing this, and now let me take you back. So my sons and I remember I told you I had my 9-year-old and my 11-year-old with me. So, oh, by the way, here's a quick picture. This is one of the veterans carrying one of the barricades to the White House. He's disabled. He's missing his legs, and he's carrying the barricade on a Segway to the White House during this protest. At the same time that this is going on, my sons and I, kind of before the main crowd gets there, my sons and I get there because we're on the leading edge. And my 11-year-old turns to me, because remember, we were holding a sign that says "Government and media run by organized crime." And my son looks at me and he says, "Dad, I don't think that the police know that this is organized crime." I'm like, yeah, they do. And a second or two later, he goes, "Dad, I don't think that the police know that the government is organized crime." I'm like, "Yes, son, yes, they do." And finally, he asked me like third time, he's like, "Dad, I don't think the police know that it's organized crime." And so I go, "Come with me." And we walk over to one of the guard posts that line the perimeter of the White House and go up to the guard. Now, keep in mind, for whatever reason, because I have short hair and good posture, everybody thinks that I used to be in the military. I've never been in the military, but because I have short hair and good posture, evidently I come across as being in the military. And so I believe that that gave me some rapport with the guard at the White House. And I go up to him and I say, "Hey, excuse me, and I got my sons here, educational experience. I was kind of explaining to them that the government is run by organized crime. They don't seem to think that you guys know that this is organized crime. I was kind of explaining to them that you did. And I was, that you just kind of let my son in on the big secret. And and the guy gets a big smile on his face, and he's like, well, I can't say that it's organized crime, as he begins winking and laughing at my son. And I go, thank you, officer. I appreciate it. And we like walk off. And he's like, well, yeah, daddy's winking, but was he saying it was organized crime? I go, okay. And we begin going up to other guard posts and police, because some of them were Washington police. And not everybody would talk to us, but many would either kind of nod knowingly, would wink, or in the case of the Washington Metro Police, yeah, we know it's organized crime. What do you want us to do about it? And all of a sudden, I had this realization that, holy shit, they all know that this is organized crime. And you could see it in their eyes when we would ask them, though, even the ones that wouldn't say anything, you could tell they kind of knew that this was organized crime. And so it dawned on me, hey, these guys have all the guns. They're law enforcement. So now I get my boys and we start going to each individual guard post, and we switch it up a little bit, and we start talking to the Uniformed Secret Service and the other, police agencies. The park police were there, and I begin going up and talking to them and saying, hey, I've talked to numerous of the guard posts and the police agencies that are here on the scene, and all you guys seem to know that this is organized crime. You guys have the guns, you're law enforcement, you guys could do something about it. You could arrest these criminals. You would be the new founding fathers. We could get rid of this organized crime system once and for all. You've got the Army here to help you. And about this time, now the veterans are now here kind of in full force, and now they've been piling, guards on. And so the scene is a complete riot, and the Secret Service is in full, I don't know what to do. We've never encountered protesters that we're scared of before. And so they deploy snipers to try and intimidate the crowd at the same time that this is going on. And I'll get to the snipers in a second. But as I begin, so now as I'm talking to the Uniformed Secret Service, as I'm talking to the Washington police, I'm now discussing with them the option of upholding their law enforcement duties to arrest the obvious criminals in office in the White House, now that they have the Army and the veterans there to help them. And you can see that some of them are really thinking about it. And you can see, and they're like, well, and I'm like, let's do it. Let's do it. Who do we have to talk to? Who are the leaders? And they're like, well, that's my boss over there. And so then we go over to that guy, and I'm like, hey, I've been talking to all these, to the guard post, been talking to the park police. All of you guys know that this is organized crime. You've got the veterans here to do something about it. Who do we have to talk to? Who are the leaders among you? And he's like, well, that's the incident commander over there. So I go over to the incident commander, and same spiel. And almost every person I talk to, you can tell that they know that this is organized. Some of them wouldn't talk to me. Some of them were freaking out and look like they're about to wet themselves. There was a car that looked like an unmarked FBI car, and I thought they were going to shoot me and my sons because they were so scared of everything that was going on around them. And so, like I said, then they deployed snipers to try and intimidate the crowd. And so this picture showing snipers on the roof in a visible posture, for those that don't know, there's always a...
I don't have any slides. You have slides up right now? I don't have anything.
Sorry about that. Let me fix that.
There we go.
So here's a picture of the snipers on the roof of the White House. Now, I'm missing my slide deck. I apologize. But if I had the correct slide, the slide that I presented at an Arkadelphia, I did a Google search for snipers on the White House, and these pictures have been scrubbed off of Google Images. And then I did the exact same search string on DuckDuckGo, and little old DuckDuckGo is able to find all of the pictures of the snipers on the roof of the White House very easily. And so in addition to that being censored, a lot of the videos showing the Secret Service crying and the Secret Service shoved up against the window, up against the gates by the veterans, that's also been censored off of Google, as has the video that showed a 1/4 mile long train of veterans with shot from above with the barricades marching to the White House. That's been gone. But these snipers were not intimidating the veterans at all. To the contrary, the veteran and not only were they deployed on the roof, there was another team that looked like it was kind of like a change of watch, where the next shift was made visible on the ground in an effort to intimidate the veterans. To the contrary, the veterans are flipping off the Secret Service counter sniper team, yelling, "How can you work for Obama? He's a socialist. He's a criminal. This is obviously organized crime." That was me. But just insulting them in every way, shape, form that they can. At the same time that we're continuing to talk to these to Secret Service agents, Capitol Park Police. At one time, one of the uniform protective detail walks out of one of the White House gates, and I went up to him. I said, "Are you uniform protective detail?" He said, "Yes." I go, "You guys know this is organized crime. Why don't you do this?" And he started walking away with his head between his legs, and you could just literally, by the way, he's like looking at the ground. I mean, he was ashamed of himself to be participating in it. But 100%, I believe that guy knew that this was organized crime, and you could just see by the way that he hung his head that he did. So anyway, a riot is going on. Here it is. Here's pictures of some of the stuff that's been censored off of the internet, the pictures of the snipers. Oh, here it is right here. Here's the slide that I was trying to tell you. So this is a comparison of Google versus DuckDuckGo, where, oh, look, Google with its billions of dollars of NSA and CIA resources and funding and In-Q-Tel investment can't find it, but little old DuckDuckGo can. So to get back to the story, so the snipers aren't intimidating the veterans. So now they bring out the Washington police, and they're going to push the veterans with riot police. And these guys look like they're about to wet their pants. They do not, we can see on their face, they do not want to do this. And so there's about 36 Washington, D.C. Metro police being suited up with tear gas and riot gear to push these veterans away from the White House. And then, damn it, friggin' truckers show up. And all of a sudden, all these trucks from this ride to the Constitution pull up at the White House. And right when I thought that we could have done it, half the crowd gets pulled away to these damn trucks, and the whole thing kind of dissipates. But it wasn't for naught, because now we know the biggest secret of the Secret Service, and that is that they know that this is organized crime. And so when I told the story at the conference, I don't think that the Secret Service and the Park Police and the Washington, D.C. Metro Police know that the people know that it's organized crime. And so I have a new strategy when I go to Washington, D.C. that I'm now kind of trying to promote. And that is, when you go to Washington, D.C., go to the White House, go to the guard gates around the White House, talk to the Park Police, look them in the eye, and ask them if they think that the federal government has been hijacked by organized crime interests that are looting the population and getting away with it because the media is in on it. and see, just look in their eyes and understand that they know it, and then tell them that we have their back and that we expect them as law enforcement to do something about it. And maybe if we came back every single month, like let's say on the anniversary, the 13th or around the 13th, and maybe it starts slow, maybe it grows, but maybe if we showed the the uniformed Secret Service, the Park Police, and the Washington Metro Police that we have their back, that we can help them effect a citizen's arrest on this organized crime government, and that we expect them to do their job and put an end to this organized crime government. If they know that we know and have their back, maybe they'll do something about it. And maybe if they don't, then maybe we arrest them as well. But I'm going to start going back every month on or about the 13th for 1 year. And I think by October 2020, we could get enough people behind the idea to maybe effect a citizen's arrest on this obvious organized crime system with the help of the Secret Service, the Park Police, and the Metro DC Police that know what's going on. And the majority of them, I'm assuming, are good people and would like to see this organized crime system end. And so that's the biggest secret of the Secret Service. And that's the story of how the veterans told the government no and shook the gates of the White House. And the 7th anniversary is coming up on October the 13th, 2020. Will be the 7th anniversary of the Veterans March on the memorials. And I'd like to invite those veterans and other veterans back to Washington, D.C. with voluntarists and anarchists and libertarians and people of good persuasion and the anti-war movement and the anti-corruption movement. And let's support our law enforcement officers. Let them know that we have their back, and let's all arrest these criminals together. Citizens Arrest 2020.
That would be absolutely amazing to see.
October 13th, 2020, the 7th anniversary of the Veterans March on the memorials. But going back every month to build support and educate the Secret Service, the Washington Police, and the Metro Police on the criminality of the government. So we've got all the evidence. We've got it on 8 gig flash drives that we call the Liberator that you can get at understandingourslavery.com. And half of it is evidence of government and media criminality that back up everything in the book. And so I've got copies of the book for the Secret Service. I've got flash drive. I'll have flash drives for the Secret Service. We'll do a seminar series for the Secret Service. We'll bring in experts on the Pentagon missing $10+ trillion. We'll bring in experts on the TARP, the TOLF, the criminality, the bailouts. We'll bring in experts on how the media is working with it. And and over the course of the year, we'll educate, we'll build the legal case, and I think we can culminate the whole thing a year's time. And so Citizens Arrest 2020, October 13th, 2020, at the White House, World War II Museum, World War II Memorial, and then a march to the White House again. I look forward to seeing everybody there.
Definitely. That would be absolutely amazing to see.
So that's one of the things that I'm up to. And the other is just really getting a startup public policy organization called the Art of Liberty Foundation off the ground, where we're kind of building the case and trying to expose the tools and the techniques that the government is using, and the collaboration of the media, explaining how the media propaganda system works. And we try and offer the healthy solutions of voluntarism, free markets, peace, anti-interventionism, agorism, counter-economics, things that you can do to reduce the power of this organized crime government and really expose the organized crime government's illegitimacy and criminality widely in ways that get around the propaganda system that they've constructed, that is both, kind of the old school radio, TV, and movies, and a half a dozen companies on the DARPA internet that are controlling perception, like Google and YouTube, through algorithmic censorship or through selectively editing reality the way Wikipedia does. Or I was recently kicked off Meetup for trying to attend a meetup or, discuss the content engine censors content. So there's about 24 companies, and we're trying to expose that, and we're trying to provide healthy alternatives. And you can understand that. You can understand more about what we do at understandingourslavery.com. And there is a tab there for the Art of Liberty Foundation, and the Art of Liberty Foundation will kind of explain what we do in some of our programs.
Very good. Now, I'd like to get your thoughts on what's going on now with Trump, basically. For me, I've always thought every president we've had is basically a puppet, and I don't think it's any different now with Trump. He's done some things that's made me raise my eyebrow, some things that are different than other presidents, but I still think it's part of a script, it's part of the narrative. What are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, it's another actor. So we've got a reality TV show that has been propped up as a billionaire to give him the illusion of being independent of the organized crime system, when if you look into his shady past, he's a casino owner. So I mean, it's intergenerational organized crime. And so as far as I can tell, Trump is kind of like a money laundering casino owner that runs some hotel properties and things like that for kind of like the mob. And what they did is they gave him some, media training, some reality, TV shows, so that he'd look good on TV and understands how to, to kind of lie to the camera. But if you, peel back the onion and you take a look at his connections to George Soros, if you take a look at his connections to the Kushners, to political Zionists that are spending hundreds of millions of dollars to lobby and bribe Congress, who then in turn transfer billions of dollars to Israel. If you take a look at the fact that he's got Goldman Sachs at Treasury, if you take a look at the fact that he's continuing these wars, which are in and of themselves essentially mass murder for resources, if you take a look at the fact that he's saying that government is legitimate in and of itself, if you take a look at the fact that he's got a little, what appears to be kind of like a little bribery operation in the fact that you can go to his hotel. So at the Trump Hotel in Washington, D.C., there are 3 $25,000 a night penthouses. And so if you want to give money to Trump, when you come to Trump to see him, all you have to do is rent 1 or 2 or all 3 of the $25,000 a night penthouses, and all he has to say is, "Oh, where are you staying while you're in Washington D.C.?" And all you have to do is reply, "Oh, we're at the Trump Hotel in the penthouse for a week or 2 weeks or however long it is," and now you've transferred hundreds of thousands of dollars to Trump. And even if it was recorded on tape, it's all quote unquote legal. And so that is the system. And under his administration, people are still paying half their income in overt taxes, covert taxes, and inflation. The fractional reserve system is still mulcting them. The Clintons haven't been arrested. The crime of 9/11 hasn't been revealed. So it's more of the same. It's just a different season. Politics in Washington, D.C. is a television show. And because people are kind of ignoring Washington, D.C., every new season, they got to bring in some new cast members, and they got to shake it up. And Trump is now just says the zaniest things because they want people watching, they want people participating, and they've propped this guy up as a kind of a populist straw man. He's constantly pandering to the order followers, the military, and the police forces that prop up his criminal regime. He's still running the Prussian model of education and the government's mandatory schools. Trump is more of the same. He's run by the exact same people that control Hillary and the Clintons. It's a 100% continuation of the policies that matter to the ruling administration. He's divide and conquer. We're just gonna divide up the population into the two largest demographics that people can fall into, and then both parties will be completely aligned on all the things that are important to the kind of organized crime system. They're all for mandatory vaccinations. They're all for forced mandatory government schools. They're all for taxation at exorbitant rates. They're all for monopoly fiat money that banks get to issue out of thin air. And so all the things that are important to the organized crime system, they're lockstep on. And then they'll just fight over the things that they know agitate the two largest identifiable demographic groups in the country. And then they get divide and conquer going, and Trump is just more of the same.
Well, where do you think this show's going with 2020? Do you think they're going to stick with more of the same, or switch it up to a Democrat this time?
So, I mean, at some level, it doesn't really matter because, once you understand that government is illegitimate, that these people don't really have the ability, the moral legitimacy to rule, that government as a concept is illogical and indoctrinated and doesn't work, it doesn't produce the goods, the quote unquote Constitution doesn't work, it didn't limit government. Supposedly the Constitution was to limit government. We have the biggest government in all of history. Supposedly it was to guarantee rights. It doesn't guarantee rights. The government routinely breaks breaks its own Bill of Rights. Walk through the airport, there's no Fourth Amendment. Government agents will search you. They'll come into your houses. Government frequently searches homes without warrants. These are criminals, and they're just pretending to abide by their part of the contract while forcing you to abide by the other one. They don't have any legitimacy. And once you really understand that, and once you come to terms with the idea that we've been tricked, they forced us to go to these mandatory government schools where they taught us that it's legitimate. But once you can kind of like step back from that and you can analyze it and say, hey, wait a minute, does this concept of government even make sense at all? And you realize, hey, this is illogical, it's immoral, it's wrong for one group of people to get to use violence on everybody else. Once you kind of realize that, then it doesn't really matter what television show is going on in DC. And also, once you realize that the media is in on it, and once you realize that there really are just a handful of corporations running hundreds of subsidiaries to give everybody kind of the illusion of diversity of information sources and diversity of opinion, then you don't have to worry about what's going on the television show. You can focus your attention on the matador instead of being distracted by the matador's cape. And really, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to empower people with the book to understand how the system works. And so with understanding our slavery, we're trying to take people from 0 to 60 by using the visualizations, by making what was invisible visible, by showing the historical pattern, by exposing that the U.S. government is using the exact same playbook as the Nazi government, as the Soviet government, as the East German government. And really, once people see it and see it with their own eyes, they can't unsee it. And then once you kind of abandon this indoctrinated religion of statism, the belief that you have to have the government, well, then the other thing that we try and do with both the book and the thumb drive, the flash drive, the Liberator, which you can download for free at understandingourslavery.com, is we try and expose people to what has been hidden. And what has been hidden is voluntarism, the only quote-unquote political solution that's fair for everybody, which is nobody gets the ring of power, nobody gets to use violence on anybody else, and that the world is a self-organizing place that produces spontaneous order, and everything that the government does to quote-unquote protect you, or to quote-unquote educate you, or to quote-unquote do whatever it does that's legitimate and non-redistributive, because it's wrong for the government to steal money from some people and give it to others. And so, but when it comes to protection, because you have the right to protect your own life, liberty, and property, you can delegate a right that you have yourself to a night watchman or to a security company. So you're not going to have police, monopoly police. You'll have competing protection agencies. You might have ADT and Westech. And because you have the ability to protect your life, liberty, and property, you can delegate that right to ADT and Westech, and it'll probably cost $35-40 a month, and it'll come with an alarm system and a monitoring service, and an armed guy with a gun will come out, but you don't have to worry about him shooting your dog. You don't have to worry about him arresting you because you have the wrong plant in your house. You don't have to worry about him arresting you because you have a card game going on with some friends. And he's not going to be committing road piracy on the roads and pulling you over and extorting you for money, because you don't have the right to do that. So you can't delegate the right to engage in road piracy to someone. And so the police would only be focused on protecting life, liberty, and property, and getting and pursuing criminals, instead of arresting overwhelmingly peaceful people for victimless crimes and putting them in for-profit prisons. And so the other half of the flash drive, the Liberator, there's short videos and documentaries and books that kind of explain how the free market and entrepreneurs would produce all of the legitimate services that people want from government, while getting rid of the violence and the extortion and the taxation and the war and everything else. And so, we're because we're being censored on the mainstream media, and because we're being censored on these DARPA internet company platforms, we put it onto this flash drive so that anybody that has it can get around the censorship by copying it to their own flash drive. You know, if you're at a friend's house, you can keep it in your wallet. You can hand it to them and say, "Hey, here's what the media is hiding from you." They can put it in their computer. They can copy 8 gigs. They get the book. They get the poster. They get books on PDF, documentaries, short videos, MP3s, podcasts, an introduction to the alternative media. They get the evidence of complete media criminality, creating stories out of whole cloth, being caught manufacturing the news, being caught lying, being caught putting things down the memory hole, like the Oklahoma City bombing, evidence of multiple bombs. And by the way, those videos of everything that I described in the first part of the interview is on this. You can actually see the newscasts and the press conferences describing extra bombs in the video simply by downloading a Liberator for free from understandingourslavery.com. And you can see the media ownership charts. You can see the chart showing how a handful of companies, organizations, the Bilderberg Group, the Council on Foreign Relations, and the Trilateral Commission have maneuvered their members into the key reporterships, editorships, publisherships, and in dozens and dozens of major publications. to be able to sell an agenda, a war, cover up 9/11, whatever the propaganda crime is. Once you see the visualization, we make what's visible invisible. All of that's on the Liberator, understandingourslavery.com.
Now, the system, it seems so big. It seems too big to fail. And even though I see a lot of people waking up, I do see a lot of people in a way devolving. I see the system beating people down still. Do you think that we have enough people that we can someday reverse all this, that we could actually make this change within our lifetime?
Oh, absolutely. I'm very, very optimistic. The fact that we're being censored so openly now, that the government has kind of, and the media have really kind of had to come out and really take the iron fist out of the velvet glove and begin banning people off of YouTube, banning people off of Facebook, banning, openly shadow banning people on Twitter, censoring the alternative media, deleting hundreds of alternative media pages off of Facebook in October of 2018 in a way that makes it absolutely kind of obvious to anybody with two brain neurons to rub together that this is that Facebook is being used as a control of perception, censorship platform. That Google has now been caught openly censoring, changing search results, changing the autocomplete suggestions to hide things from Hillary during the election. We have all of the evidence of Google's censorship, the history of the DARPA programs that Google came out of, the Highland Forum here on the Liberator. The article is called How the CIA Made Google. So the fact that they're censoring is indicative that we're winning, that people are figuring out that the media is operating as a cartel, that they're trying to control perception by controlling the information people receive, either through the mandatory government school or through the media. And as more and more people figure it out, at the same time, we're getting around that censorship. We can get around it with flash drives. We can get around it with the hand-to-hand distribution of physical books. We can get around it with in New Hampshire, where I'm part of something called the Free State Project. There's organizations in New Hampshire that are putting little mini libraries of liberty into laundromats and other kind of public spaces. And so we're getting, so slowly and surely, we're going to get around the censorship. You can't stop the signal. And this is kind of the coolest thing, is that once people find the Veritas and they glom on and they begin to understand what's going on, then once people realize that there's a man kind of behind the curtain in the media, and the media is being operated as kind of like a mighty Wurlitzer, where they can push out the same agenda over hundreds of individual stations, publications, satellite networks, broadcast networks. Once you realize there's a man behind the curtain, it's a lot harder to fool people again. And so really this revolution is only going in one direction, because once people realize that government is illegitimate, immoral, illogical, has been indoctrinated from us, when they realize that the government is using techniques like paying the NFL teams to do the flag worship before the football games, basketball games, that they're using, that they're product placing the American flag into movies and TV shows, and always making the government the hero. Once people realize that, kind of how the program works, they're not going back to statism. They're not going to go back to wearing shaving their heads and wearing a costume, identifying them as an immoral order follower that's been suckered by the government and by the mandatory government school system. People are going to take off these uniforms. They're not going to participate in this once they understand the system. And so this revolution is only going in one direction. I'm incredibly optimistic about what we're doing. We're going to get around the censorship. We're going to have blockchain-based social media platforms that are going to be uncensorable and decentralized. we're going to have one final example. So the files on this drive, they're about 8 gig. Someone has recently donated $1,000 to the Art of Liberty Foundation to take the information on this drive and put 10, what's now known as a pirate box. We're about to rename it the Liberator Wi-Fi. But 10 of these little Wi-Fi endpoints into government schools in New Hampshire with the Pre-State Project, which is an Art of Liberty. You can find out more by searching Art of Liberty Pre-State Project. But to put these into the schools where it broadcasts an SSID that says, here's what the government is hiding from you. And when someone clicks on it, instead of getting Wi-Fi, they get a little message explaining what's going on, that the government's controlling the media and the information they receive through this mandatory government school system. And here's what they're hiding. And here are all of the files on the flash drive are now available to everyone within Wi-Fi range in the school. And so there's no way, and anybody can create a pirate box or a Liberator Wi-Fi. We're going to publish the instructions and we're going to sell them in our store. And we're going to, every time they put up a block, we're going to get around, because you can't stop the signal, and nothing is as powerful as an idea whose time has come. And that idea is voluntarism, it's peace, it's tolerance, it's nonviolence. It is the only political system that's fair for everybody. Nobody gets the ring of power. It's the thing they're trying to hide from you. That's how you know it's the real McCoy. And so as more and more people find out that we don't really need government, that everything it does could be done by the free market, when they understand how badly the government is ripping them off, when they understand how the government is and the banks are stealing the value out of their money, because we're going to tell them, you're going to see people continue to abandon the most dangerous superstition, this belief, this indoctrinated belief in having a small group of people get the ability to use violence on everyone else in society. It's antiquated, it's barbaric, it doesn't deliver the goods, it's being exposed as criminal, and we're going to finally get around this propaganda system, and we're finally going to expose this system, and we're going to bring real freedom and peace and harmony and economic prosperity that comes with it to everybody on this planet, and it's going to be amazing.
Very well said. And before you head out tonight, I want to thank you again. Is there anything you have upcoming that you'd like to talk about before you go?
So we're doing an East Coast tour. We just finished, like I said, we did an Arkadelphia in Philadelphia. We did an event in New York. We just did an event in Manchester. We're going to be doing one on Sunday, September, I think it's the 29th, in Portsmouth. We're still looking for a venue. If you know anybody that can help us with a venue in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, please let us know. If anybody's in Portsmouth, they can come out and see us. We'll have some more venues. We just sold out of the 4th printing of the book. It was the best-selling book at the Arkadelphia conference. Sold out of all the flash drives, but you can reserve a copy on back order at understandingourslavery.com. The next version will be the 4th edition. The 5th printing, it will have even more evidence, even more improvements over the last edition. More and more people are downloading it all the time, and more people are learning the truth about the criminality of the government, the illegitimacy of the government. So check us out. Reserve a copy today, understandingourslavery.com.
Very good. And thank you so much for coming back on, and I'm sure we'll have a lot more to talk about again.
Thank you, Chris. I appreciate it, and thank you to your audience. And peace, love, anarchy, voluntarism, real freedom worldwide, coming soon to a town near you.
Sounds great. You have a great night.
You too. Thanks, Chris. Bye, guys.